Hey everyone, welcome back. I hope you're doing well out there. So today's video is going to be something of a bit of a divergence from our normal kind of core talking points here on the channel. And this is frankly a video I'm a little afraid to make just because it's kind of a divergence and because I'm kind of dipping my toes into a whole other topic and talking point. But I feel like this is a message that needs to be said. And quite frankly, it's just been on my mind and on my heart. And I want to give a certain insight and certain perspective to you. So today we're going to be talking about men in particular in our modern society and how this is not how it's supposed to be, and kind of unpack how it is supposed to be for men, and help you really understand perhaps why you're feeling lost, ungrounded, confused, overwhelmed by the world, threatened, alone, uncomfortable, stressed, all the things that I see modern men going through, especially younger men, or especially men who perhaps aren't like, let's say, the top few percentile of men who are extra attractive or extra fit or extremely masculine and dominant. There's a whole huge ocean of men out there that are really struggling and suffering. And I want to offer just kind of one idea in terms of how it's supposed to be and how it is into this conversation. So let me give a couple caveats here, and then we'll go ahead and dive into the major point I want to make. So first things first, obviously male-female dynamics and feminism and the politicization of all this has really made it difficult to have these conversations in good faith here, in the public domain, let's say, right? So here's my request, first of all. If you are non-male identified and you are non-male, let's say, raised, right? In other words, you did not grow up socialized as a male. I want to ask you kindly and respectfully to refrain from posting your comments about, well, I am from this walk of life, I am from this experience, and we have issues too. And there's, what about us and these problems? I want to be clear. Those are all very real perspectives and problems too. I don't want to invalidate any of that, but I want to kind of just ask you politely to not intervene with redirecting the conversation towards other important topics. So we can just kind of let this conversation be what it is and be focused for people who were raised and socialized as men in this society. Okay, so that's my first caveat. And second caveat is obviously just in general, please be respectful in the comment section. I'm not really trying to get political here. If you're one of these people who gets a real joy out of Schadenfreude and male-female political back and forth and all, please don't do that here in this comment section. This is a community that I want to create a healing, safe space for people. And I want to have real conversations that touch upon like real shit that needs to be discussed. And I want that to be generally productive and constructive. So this is not a place for Schadenfreude or gotcha or, hate or any of that. And if I see that stuff, I'm just straight up going to delete those comments, just so you know. So I hate to censor, but I want to keep it really focused and respectful and kind and empathetic and, honest. Okay. So let's just understand this is a safe space for this conversation, and there are other conversations where I can show up and be supportive for other walks of life, okay? With that being said, I want to offer you just a little bit of context on what I'm thinking about and what it is, the major point I want to make here. Okay, so just a little bit of context on why I'm sharing this. Long story short, my own personal growth path with my own relationship to masculinity, both my own and masculinity in the world around us, has been a long, difficult, challenging, painful process. I had some really negative imprints about male role models early on. It took me a long fucking time to untangle that, and a lot of psychedelics and a lot of challenging myself and growth and learning and all of that. It has been a long, deep process of reclamation for me. And I want to be clear here that I don't see myself as some super intense male role model teacher. Right? That's not really what I'm organized around. It's not my messaging here. But as a coach, a lot of my clients are male. like a surprising amount, because men generally don't get into the therapeutic side of things, right? And generally, you're not going to see men in therapy nearly in the numbers that women do, right? So that's a little surprising. And I've had so many incredible conversations about what it means to be a man, what it means to be masculine, what it means to heal yourself, what it means to re-imprint father figures that were either absent or toxic. I've had a lot of really incredible conversations and work done around this topic in my private sessions. It's also something that I'm always actively exploring and growing and leaning into and developing in myself. And I think it's an important piece that sadly in our current politicized world is very demonized, right? So I'm sharing this again, not to say that I'm like the pinnacle of masculinity and you should all follow me because I'm your male role model. Not at all. I'm sharing this because I've had to fucking dig deep to even be where I'm at. I've had to work through a lot of pain. I've had to struggle. I've had to really, really wrap my head around this topic and what it means to be a healthy man in a generally, let's call it relationally dysfunctional society and culture with a long history and legacy of trauma, both inside the family system and society to person trauma through the socialization process, right? So I've really, really worked on this a lot from my early psychedelic experiences back when I was a teenager all the way to current time. This is a huge piece of my personal work. So I wanted to give a little bit of this to you and share a little bit of this with you, just so, you know, perhaps you can benefit from what I'm starting to understand as I really start to heal and as I really start to integrate a clear understanding of healthy attachment and right relating and what that all means and what the implications are. So, with that being said, okay, context out of the way, caveats out of the way. Sorry it took 4 minutes or whatever it took for me to say all this. Let's get to the frickin' point and let me share with you my thoughts on how this is not how it's supposed to be and how it is supposed to be for men. Let's go ahead and get into it here. So, I've been thinking a lot about this topic and a lot about what it means to be a healthy man in a toxic world and how do we bring ourselves back into right balance with our masculinity in a world that kind of has all kinds of different messaging for men, you know, in particular young men. I've been thinking a lot about the phenomenon of mental health struggles that young men are dealing with, the underperformance, the unplugging from society, the black pilling that's going on in you know, male spaces, the dropping out, the, of course, you know, failure to launch, the social anxiety, the lack of dating, lack of getting laid, all these ways that young men particularly, but men in general, struggle. I've also been thinking about the other side of that coin. So, not perhaps the underperforming men, but the overly puffed up, dominant, assertive, overly masculine, overly disagreeable, combative side of men as well, and how that's out of balance also. And what it means to be a balanced, healthy, embodied, aligned, spiritually aligned, emotionally aligned, mentally aligned, physically aligned, fully functional man. Okay. Again, this has been a work in progress for me, but I've been thinking in particular about how, from a male point of view, society, you know, tries to tear you down. The experience of society is that it, you know, everywhere you go, other men are trying to tear you down because they want to compete with you. A lot of women are trying to tear you down, you know, because they're disappointed, they're unimpressed, they expect more, they want more out of you. Role models try to tear you down, right? Legal structures, if we want to get into that. Again, I don't want to get into the politics side of this so much. From a male point of view, there's this experience of often feeling very alone, very unsupported, very unseen at the human level, at the heart level, at the like the fucking little boy inside that shell, right? And there's this experience of everywhere you go, you're getting messages of invalidation, right? Judgment, shame, blame, accountability, which is whatever, it is what it is, right? The world's going to world, society's going to society, but there's all these messages. And the effect, the experience from a male point of view, is that really a lot of these messages are trying to kind of slow you down, invalidate you, tear you down, cause you pain, cause you to question yourself more, and in general, um, knock you back a peg, for lack of a better phrase. And for especially a young man's perspective who's just trying to establish himself and build himself up and find his way in the world and figure his life out and his passion and his career and meaning and purpose and who he is and all that, it's so confusing and daunting, right? It's like, why is the world constantly trying to knock me down a peg? Why is the world constantly trying to, like, make me weaker, make me smaller, make me suffer, make me second guess myself when I'm already in that process inside, right? And more so, I'm just trying to find stability, clarity, identity, purpose, meaning, etc. A lane, for lack of a better phrase, right? Now, before I tell you how it's supposed to be, I just want to be clear that this is not exactly, there's some nuance there. Some of this is normal, but it's not how it's supposed to be. In other words, we're living in a time, we're living in a world, we're living in a society, or a set of societies rather, where all of that is extreme and not commensurate, not in balance with what you need to have in order for that to make sense. So you're living in a world where you feel isolated, disconnected, unseen, alone, overwhelmed, confused, lost, maybe traumatized, maybe suffering. Who knows what you've been through already, right? And it's just nonstop. And it's not supposed to be that way, and it really isn't. And I want you to understand, if you feel lost, if you feel confused, if you feel overwhelmed, and you're like, fuck, I'm all alone, you're not wrong. Sadly, it's not supposed to be this way. It really isn't. Okay. So, with that being said, how is it supposed to be, right? How is this supposed to work? How do healthy men grow up? How do you become a healthy man? How does a healthy man come to exist? And how should society, and in particular other men, organize in relationship to each other, right? So let's talk about how it's supposed to be. From my point of view, it only makes sense to tear men down if you first built them up. Okay. Now, I think all of these instincts that society has to tear men down, to some degree, some of it's politicized and, egregious, shall we say. But I think there's a very natural tribal instinct there, which is to test men, right? And I think that's normal and healthy, right? You will be tested by other men. You will be tested by society. You will be tested by women in particular, right? Especially women that you want to date or that you want to build a life with or that you're attracted to, right? That's normal, right? That's kind of how it's always been to some degree. The strength, because the male role traditionally, historically, evolutionarily, was to be strong, to be, the hunter, to be the warrior, to be the aggressor, right? To be the military arm of the tribe, so to speak, amongst other things. The tribe needs to know that these men are strong enough to handle their role. So that's normal. But in our society, that's all like, it's like that's a fire that's supposed to be kept at a certain size, but it's just like dumpster fire now. It's just like throw more gas on it constantly, right? So there's this accelerated testing of men. But there's a whole missing piece here that makes it completely imbalanced in the sense that, men need to be built up first, like I said, right? And what does that mean? That means, first of all, being raised in a safe, loving, healthy family system where you are seen, where you're welcomed, where you're accepted and validated, where you're allowed to make mistakes and grow and learn, where you're empowered and taught how to actualize your gifts. You're empowered to understand yourself clearly so that you know your strengths and your weaknesses. You have a sense of belonging, whether or not you screw up, right? You know that you have that foundation, that solid, loving, connected, unconditional foundation. Okay. That needs to be there first. And for not just men, for everyone, but men too, that's largely absent in our society. People have forgotten how to parent. People have forgotten how to create healthy, functional families, right? So that needs to be there. Okay. And that formats your nervous system to feel safe and self trusting and comfortable and grounded. Okay. That's what I mean by secure attachment and regulating the nervous system that I'm always harping on about. It's that you were raised right. And the messages your nervous system got is that you're always loved, you'll always be supported, you'll always belong. Okay. Men need that support layer, that baseline of support, so that they can feel strong enough to compete with each other and to engage society where they will be judged and shamed and challenged and pushed back on and invalidated and all that. And so that you can lean into that, knowing that you're supported, that you've been built up. Okay. So that's the first layer of being built up. But then there's also helping you develop competency in certain skills, right? So, like a mindful parent is probably going to help you not only recognize yourself and your strengths and your weaknesses and help you feel unconditionally loved and supported, but they're also going to help you start to think about, at least, and look at and be concerned with building competency, because that is your niche, that is your skill set, that is your ability in society, right? Now, from there, you also need to be built up by other men who have your fucking back, your boys, your ride or dies, your guys who get you, who see you, who will not let you fall. Okay. And I think this should be multi-generational. This shouldn't just be like your peers, because some of your peers are also your competitors. Fair enough. It is what it is. This should also be your father, your uncles, your grandfather, the community of men around you, your role models and mentors from whatever church, religion, community experiences, school role models, etc. There should be other older, stronger men helping to hold you up or helping to remind you that if you fall, we got your back, right? And all of that creates this sense of being resourced and it really gives you the courage, right? So if you have self-trust, you have a sense of competency, you have a sense that you're held up by other men who will teach you how to be a man, who will teach you how to be strong, who will teach you how to endure hardship, who will teach you how to stay in it and win, right? Then with all of that there, now you're built up. Now, when you go to do the hard shit, when you go to talk to that girl, when you go to build a career and be an entrepreneur, when you go to, set out on an adventure or try something new or whatever your calling is, you're able to take that risk because you have a support system, right? So, yeah, to some degree, for anyone, you go out into the world beyond your family structure and your community structure and the people who have your back. You should expect that there are going to be rude people. There are going to be people who are triggered by you and competitive with you. There are going to be people who do like you but want to test you, who are skeptical of you and unsure of you. You're going to find people who are just straight up dangerous, who are just straight up like sociopaths or psychopaths. They exist. They're out there. You may bump into them, right? You're going to find also, tentative allies and weird political stuff. It's messy, it's complicated, it's threatening, it's challenging, and that's normal. That's society. That's people interacting. Okay. But none of that works if you've never been built up. Right. So you can't deal with that. Like, how do you deal with all that alone when you're essentially operating with an operating system of like a vulnerable little boy who never learned to trust himself, never develop competency, feels all alone, feels under resourced, feels unseen, under supported? Like, that's so. Am I making this clear? So there's a way it's supposed to be. I think that is healthy, right? It's not necessarily wrong that the world wants to test us. It's not necessarily wrong that we're going to deal with resistance and pushback and challenge and conflict and haters and all that. It's not wrong. It's fine. What's missing is where it's wrong, right? What's missing is all of this support system that isn't there, right? Obviously, in addition, let's like, just since we're talking about it, like just name all the shit here. There's also that we're now coming from generations of men. There's World War One, World War Two, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan. We're coming from generations of men who have real trauma that they never knew how to sort out. We didn't know the shit back then that we know now about healing. And that does, there's science to back this up, get passed down epigenetically. So that's a whole nother piece here, is that we have, tons of men out there who were, unhealthy attachment systems and alcoholics and addicts and, again, PTSD from war and, blah, 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 blah. I'm not saying there aren't knots to untangle for women or for trans people or for, non-binary or for all the other people out there. I'm not saying that doesn't exist too. But as men, socialized as men, we are receiving all of that as well. So chances are, and this is what I see a lot in young men, their fathers were disengaged, poorly emotionally attuned anyways, most of the time, not always. Sometimes absent altogether, or if they were around, there's a distant relationship. There's not a whole lot of mentoring. There's not a whole lot of modeling of what's healthy. And a lot of young men kind of grow up then gravitating towards where they can get connection, which happens to be screens, online, gaming, these crazy spaces men fall into, which then we become victims, or not victims, it's not the right word. We become vulnerable to all kinds of weird messaging in those spaces because we are longing for connection and clarity and a sense of belonging and a sense of being grounded in something real. So this is, again, what I'm seeing over and over and over here. So it's you're not supposed to be alone and vulnerable and then launch yourself into the world and have the world fucking tear you down. That makes no sense. It's unfair. It's unkind. And society is deeply unconscious about this. People just do this shit without even thinking about the impact it has on you. And part of the position you're in, if this resonates for you, is learning to forgive that, learning to make that okay. Learning to forgive the unconsciousness of others, learning to forgive the way society is out of balance in this sense, learning to forgive our absent male role models or our toxic male role models, our confusing male role models, etc. How it's supposed to be is that you grow up highly connected, highly supported, seen, validated, built up, strengthened, honed, empowered. And then from there, yeah, you're going to have to step out in the world at some point and you're going to get challenged. And that's okay. It doesn't land the same way, right? Like, as a real simple, obvious example here. For a really vulnerable, under-built up guy, once he starts engaging with other men who do the natural kind of ball busting thing that men do together, he's probably going to be very sensitive to it, very triggered by it, very offended by it. For other men, it's like, it's play. It's laughter, right? Sometimes there's some real truthy zingers in there, but in general, it's a form of play. But to someone who's never been built up, it just feels like threat. It's so confusing. To someone who's been built up, it's chuckles. It's lol. And so I just want to kind of put this message out there so that if you're lost, if you're confused, or if you're even a strong man who just somehow found his way to this video, perhaps there's a useful concept in here for you. So anyways, that's what's been on my mind and on my heart about what men really need to understand about where they're at and where society's at. One last thought here to close on, and then we'll call it a video. Do I think this is changeable? Yes, I do. Do I think men could build more community, learn how to become strong, and learn how to build each other up, and be that source of mutual empowerment? Yes, I do. And I think that's how it should be. And I think we should do that. Do I think that keeps men accountable and strong and emotionally healthier and more likely to make good decisions and treat other people well? Yes, I do. So if you're a non-male watching this whole video and you're concerned about male spaces turning into some breeding ground of toxic, expressions of oneself, I think it's quite the opposite. I think the toxicity comes from isolation and comes from disconnect and comes from overcompensation. I think men need to find belonging, find role models. Yeah, it's kind of a cliche at this point to hear that, but there's truth in it. And build each other up, because someone has to have your back. This world is fucking wild and crazy. It's getting wilder and crazier. And there's so much suffering out there. And really, truly, and this is a universal theme for all human beings, and this is something I talk about here all the time, it is belonging and connection that corrects our nervous system so we can feel our best and be at our strongest, so we can thrive and really do all the things. So all the stuff, all the messaging out there about success and money and sex and dating and succeeding and all that, that's all cool. But all that's predicated on being built up. Now, with that said, can you build yourself up? I think so. It's not as easy. It's not as fast, but yeah. And ultimately, I think it should be a both and. You should have community around you who builds you up. You should also know how to correct your own nervous system and build yourself up too. Anyways, that's all stuff I teach and stuff I work on with my clients. But I just want to share this again from the heart as a message. I don't know if I'll do more men's topics here, but if this hits home for you and resonates for you, do me a favor, leave a comment. I appreciate the thumbs up and the liking and the helping the algorithm know. Engage. What hit home here for you? Okay. I'm going to go for now because I'm done talking. I really care though about this topic. So let me know if this hits home or if you think I'm just some crazy, weird guy. Okay. Much love to you all. I'll talk to you soon. I've got way more content on the way. Take care.